the golden African sun painted the vast Masai Mara in hues of amber and crimson as dawn broke over the endless savanna. For the Kenya Wildlife Service patrol team, it was supposed to be another routine aerial survey, counting herds, checking water levels, monitoring the delicate balance of life in one of Africa's most precious ecosystems. The helicopter's rotors cut through the crisp morning air as it swept low over the acacia-dotted landscape, following migration routes that had been used by wildlife for millennia. Captain Sarah Kimani adjusted her headset as she guided the aircraft along the well-worn patrol route. 20 years of flying these surveys had taught her to read the land like a book, to spot the subtle signs that something was amiss in the intricate web of African wildlife. The dry season was approaching, and elephant herds were beginning their ancient migration toward permanent water sources. Everything should have been following predictable patterns, but today, something felt different. Through her radio crackled the voice of her co-pilot Marcus, reporting movement in Sector 7 that didn't look right. Through her binoculars, Sarah focused on a lone figure near the bend in the Mara River where the banks were low and the crossing was easiest for the great herds. An elephant, definitely young by its size, stood motionless where no elephant should be alone. In the wild, elephants are never solitary creatures, especially not juveniles, who depend entirely on their family groups for protection, guidance, and survival. The sight was so unusual that Sarah circled twice before radioing for a closer inspection. As they descended for a better view, the tragic picture became increasingly clear. A young male elephant, perhaps 3 years old, stood awkwardly by the riverbank where the red earth was churned and scattered. His right hind leg appeared damaged, and he moved with obvious difficulty and pain. Most alarming of all, there wasn't another elephant in sight for miles in any direction. The landscape around the young elephant told a story of violence and struggle. The ground was torn up in a radius of 30 meters. Acacia branches were broken and scattered, and the distinctive pattern of disturbed earth spoke of a fierce battle. This was no peaceful separation. Something terrible had happened here, leaving this young elephant stranded and vulnerable in one of Africa's most dangerous ecosystems. Sarah immediately radioed base with coordinates for the rescue team. The urgency in her voice cut through the routine chatter of the communications center. Within minutes, the emergency response protocol was activated, setting in motion a rescue operation that would ultimately change the future of veterinary medicine and wildlife conservation. Dr. James Mburu received the emergency call while conducting his morning rounds at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust facility outside Nairobi. As the head veterinarian for one of Africa's most respected wildlife rescue organizations, he had seen countless cases of animal trauma over his 15-year career. Elephant rescues, while challenging due to the animal's size and intelligence, were something he and his team handled with practiced efficiency. But the report from Captain Kimani suggested this case would be different. The drive to the rescue coordinates took nearly 4 hours across increasingly rough terrain. Dr. Mburu's team consisted of 6 specialists. 2 veterinarians, a wildlife biologist, 2 experienced elephant handlers, and a logistics coordinator who managed the complex equipment needed for large mammal rescues. Their specialized rescue vehicle carried everything from heavy-duty tranquilizers to portable surgical equipment designed to handle emergency interventions in remote locations. Approaching the site, the team could see the young elephant exactly as described, alone, injured, and clearly in distress. Through binoculars, Dr. Mburu conducted his initial assessment while the team prepared their equipment. The elephant was definitely a young male, probably separated from his natal herd during the transition to independence that typically occurs around age 3 or 4. His body language spoke of exhaustion, pain, and confusion. The evidence around the area told a dramatic story of survival against overwhelming odds. Disturbed earth, lion prints clearly visible in the soft riverbank mud, hyena tracks crisscrossing the area, and drag marks where the young elephant had obviously fought for his life against multiple predators. Broken branches and torn vegetation indicated a prolonged struggle that had raged across a significant area. Dr. Mburu named the young elephant Kondo, meaning warrior in Swahili, recognizing the extraordinary fight for survival that had brought him to this moment. Kondo's right hind leg bore deep puncture wounds and lacerations that penetrated through skin and muscle deep into the underlying tissue. The wounds were already showing signs of serious infection, with swelling, discoloration, and the distinctive odor of necrotic tissue. More concerning than the visible injuries was Kondo's overall condition. He was severely dehydrated, his skin lacking the healthy elasticity of a well-hydrated elephant. Dehydration in elephants can be fatal within days, especially for young animals whose smaller body mass makes them more vulnerable to fluid loss. He also showed signs of malnutrition, suggesting he had been separated from his mother's milk and the protection of his herd for several days. The rescue operation itself required careful coordination. Elephants, even young ones, are incredibly powerful animals whose natural fear responses can be dangerous for both the animal and the rescue team. The tranquilization process had to be precisely calculated based on Kondo's estimated weight and condition, with enough sedative to safely handle him, but not so much as to compromise his already stressed cardiovascular system. As the sedative took effect and Kondo slowly lowered himself to the ground, Dr. Mburu was able to conduct a thorough examination of his injuries. The damage to the right hind leg was extensive and devastating. Deep puncture wounds from lion canines had penetrated the muscle and created channels for bacterial infection. Hyena teeth marks showed where the pack had attempted to bring down their prey by targeting the vulnerable leg joints and tendons. The veterinary team worked quickly to stabilize Kondo for transport. They established an intravenous line for fluid replacement, administered broad-spectrum antibiotics to combat the spreading infection, and carefully cleaned and dressed the most serious wounds. The young elephant was then carefully loaded onto the specialized rescue truck using a hydraulic lift system designed for large mammals. Young bulls in elephant society sometimes become separated during predator attacks when the herd is forced to make desperate decisions for the survival of the group. The matriarchal structure of elephant society prioritizes the protection of young calves and pregnant females, sometimes leaving adolescent males vulnerable during crisis situations. This harsh reality of survival in the African wilderness meant that Kondo's family had likely been forced to abandon him to save the rest of the herd. As the truck bumped along the dirt roads toward the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust Center in Nairobi, Dr. Mburu studied the young elephant lying sedated in the specially designed transport compartment. Even unconscious, Kondo's face seemed to reflect the trauma he had endured. But there was something else in his expression, a fierce determination that reminded the veteran veterinarian why he had dedicated his life to wildlife conservation. The 4-hour journey back to the facility gave Dr. Mburu time to consider the challenges ahead. Elephant medicine is among the most complex fields in veterinary science, requiring specialized knowledge of physiology, behavior, and social dynamics unique to these remarkable animals. The size alone presents enormous challenges. Every procedure that might be routine with smaller animals becomes exponentially more complicated when dealing with a patient that weighs several tons. At the treatment facility, X-rays revealed the devastating extent of Kondo's injuries. The wounds to his right hind leg had penetrated deep into the bone, creating fractures and exposing the joint to bacterial contamination. Infection was spreading rapidly through the tissue, turning healthy muscle into necrotic material that threatened to poison his entire system. Despite aggressive treatment with antibiotics and surgical debridement, the leg was beyond saving. The medical team faced an agonizing decision that would determine not just Kondo's immediate survival, but the entire course of his future life. Amputation was the only way to stop the spreading infection and save his life, but no elephant had ever survived long-term as an amputee. The surgery itself was risky enough. Anesthetizing a 2-ton animal for major surgery requires precise calculations and constant monitoring to prevent cardiovascular collapse. Dr. Mburu assembled a surgical team of 5 specialists for the unprecedented operation. The amputation would need to remove the infected portion of the leg while preserving as much healthy tissue as possible for potential future prosthetic fitting, though at the time, such possibilities seemed purely theoretical. The surgery took 6 hours and required constant adjustment of anesthetic levels to keep Kondo stable throughout the procedure. The operation was successful in immediate medical terms. Kondo survived the amputation and the infection was eliminated. As the days passed, his vital signs stabilized, his appetite slowly returned, and the surgical site began to heal. The antibiotics had successfully halted the spread of infection, and the young elephant's remarkable constitution began to assert itself in the healing process. However, as the immediate medical crisis passed, a new and perhaps more complex challenge emerged. Kondo now faced the reality of life as a 3-legged elephant. something that had never been successfully achieved in the history of wildlife rehabilitation. The physical demands of simply supporting his massive body on 3 legs were already beginning to show their effects, even as his surgical wounds continued to heal. As the weeks turned into months during Kondo's recovery, a new and perhaps more devastating crisis emerged. The physical strain of supporting his massive body on 3 legs was taking a toll that threatened to make the life-saving surgery meaningless. Elephants in the wild walk 15 to 20 kilometers per day, a necessity driven by their enormous caloric needs and the patchy distribution of food resources across the African landscape. Kondo's attempts to maintain even basic mobility on 3 legs were causing cascading health problems throughout his body. His spine began to curve from the unnatural weight distribution, creating pressure on internal organs and nerve pathways. The constant pain and limitation seemed to affect his mental state as well. His vibrant personality began to fade as he withdrew from interaction with his caregivers and the other rescued elephants at the facility. Dr. Mburu watched helplessly as Kondo struggled with movements that should have been effortless for a young elephant. The remaining legs showed signs of joint stress and inflammation as they attempted to compensate for the missing limb. The veterinary team's frustration grew with each passing week. They had saved Kondo's life, but they couldn't give him a future worth living. Traditional veterinary medicine had reached its limits, offering pain management and supportive care, but no path toward genuine rehabilitation. That's when Dr. Rebecca Thompson arrived from Cambridge University. Dr. Thompson was a biomedical engineer specializing in animal prosthetics, drawn to Kenya by reports of Kondo's case and the unique challenges it presented. She brought with her something the team desperately needed: hope, and more importantly, research into possibilities that veterinary medicine alone couldn't provide. Dr. Thompson spent her first week at the facility simply observing Kondo, documenting his movement patterns, measuring the stresses on his remaining limbs, and assessing his psychological state. Her engineering background allowed her to see the situation in terms of mechanical problems that might have mechanical solutions, rather than the purely medical perspective that had dominated Kondo's care up to that point. During late-night sessions in the facility's small library, Dr. Thompson discovered cases from Thailand that would change everything. The breakthrough came in the form of research papers and video footage from the Friends of the Asian Elephant Foundation in Lampang, Thailand, where veterinarians and engineers had successfully fitted Asian elephants with functional prosthetic limbs. Moshe, a young Asian elephant who had lost her front leg to a landmine, was not just surviving with a prosthetic limb, she was thriving. Even more encouraging was the story of Motola, another Asian elephant successfully fitted with an artificial leg. The footage showed these elephants walking, running, and engaging in normal social behaviors despite their prosthetics. Dr. Thompson arranged a series of video conferences with Dr. Therdchai Jivakate, the Thai orthopedic surgeon who had pioneered elephant prosthetics. The conversations were both illuminating and daunting. While Asian elephants had been successfully fitted with prosthetics, African elephants presented unique challenges that had never been addressed. African elephants are significantly larger and more powerful than their Asian cousins, with adult bulls reaching weights of 6 to 7 tons compared to the 4 to 5 tons typical of Asian elephants. They also tend to be more aggressive and less accustomed to human handling, having evolved in environments where human contact was historically more limited and often hostile. The biomechanical challenges were even more significant. The bone structure, muscle distribution, and joint mechanics of African elephants differ substantially from Asian elephants. Most critically, all previous prosthetic successes had involved front limbs. No one had ever attempted to create a functional prosthetic for an elephant's hind leg, which plays a crucial role in the powerful locomotion that allows elephants to travel vast distances. But perhaps the most encouraging aspect of the Thai experience was the evidence that elephants could not only accept prosthetic limbs, but could adapt to them with remarkable intelligence and resilience. The videos showed elephants learning to adjust their gait, coordinate their movements, and even modify their behavior to accommodate their artificial limbs. Dr. Thompson established her workshop in a converted storage building at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust facility, transforming the concrete structure into a sophisticated biomedical engineering laboratory. The space soon became a hub of international collaboration, with regular video conferences connecting Nairobi to prosthetics labs in Cambridge, consultation calls with the Thai Elephant Hospital team, and daily observation sessions with Kondo himself. The workshop quickly filled with the tools and equipment necessary for advanced prosthetic design. Computer workstations for biomechanical modeling sat alongside traditional machining tools for creating physical prototypes. Materials testing equipment allowed the team to evaluate the strength and durability of different synthetic materials under the extreme stresses that an elephant prosthetic would need to withstand. The first challenge was understanding Kondo's specific needs and the unique biomechanical requirements of a hind leg prosthetic. Unlike the Thai cases involving front legs, which primarily provide support and steering, a hind leg prosthetic would need to provide the primary propulsion for the elephant's movement. The hind legs of elephants generate the powerful thrust that drives forward motion, especially during running or climbing over obstacles. Dr. Thompson's engineering team began with comprehensive biomechanical analysis using high-speed cameras and force measurement platforms. They studied healthy elephants at the Nairobi National Park, documenting how the animals distributed weight across their four legs during different gaits: walking, running, turning, and climbing. This data was essential for understanding the forces that Kondo's prosthetic would need to generate and withstand. The measurements were staggering. During normal walking, an elephant's hind leg bears approximately 40% of the animal's total weight with each step. During running, that force can triple as the leg must both support the body weight and generate forward momentum. For Kondo, even at his current reduced weight of 2 tons, this meant the prosthetic would need to withstand forces approaching 6,000 pounds per step. Material selection became a critical focus, requiring expertise from multiple engineering disciplines. The Thai prosthetics had used thermoplastic and steel components designed for the smaller Asian elephants and for front leg applications. For Kondo's hind leg prosthetic, the team needed materials that could withstand much greater forces while remaining light enough not to impede his natural movement patterns. The team experimented with titanium alloys originally developed for aerospace applications, carbon fiber composites used in racing car construction, and specialized shock-absorbing polymers designed for industrial machinery. Each material had advantages and disadvantages in terms of strength, weight, durability, and biocompatibility with elephant physiology. The socket design, the component that would attach the prosthetic to Kondo's residual limb, required particular innovation. Unlike human amputees, elephants cannot provide verbal feedback about comfort, pressure points, or proper fit. The team had to develop ways to monitor Kondo's physical responses and adjust the socket design based on behavioral cues and physiological measurements. Dr. Thompson worked closely with elephant behaviorists to understand how Kondo might communicate discomfort or acceptance of the prosthetic. Elephants have complex body language and vocalization patterns that can indicate pain, stress, contentment, or curiosity. Learning to read these signals would be crucial for successful prosthetic fitting and training. The months of design and testing were punctuated by regular consultations with Dr. Jivakate and his team in Thailand. Despite the time zone differences and language barriers, the collaboration proved invaluable. The Thai team shared detailed technical drawings, material specifications, and most importantly, insights into the behavioral aspects of elephant prosthetic adaptation. One crucial lesson from the Thai experience was the importance of gradual introduction and positive conditioning. Elephants are highly intelligent animals with excellent memories, and negative experiences during prosthetic fitting can create lasting psychological barriers to acceptance. The team developed elaborate training protocols designed to make every interaction with the prosthetic a positive experience for Kondo. Throughout this design and development period, Kondo himself remained the most challenging and unpredictable variable in the equation. His health continued to deteriorate as the strain on his 3 remaining legs took its toll. His willingness to interact with humans fluctuated dramatically, sometimes allowing close contact and examination, other times retreating to the far corner of his enclosure and refusing to approach. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during one of Dr. Thompson's routine visits to Kondo's enclosure. She had brought along a lightweight prototype socket, not intending to fit it, merely to gauge his reaction to the unfamiliar object. To everyone's surprise, Kondo approached the device with his trunk, carefully investigating its texture, weight, and scent. For the first time in months, he showed genuine curiosity rather than fear or withdrawal. This moment marked the beginning of Kondo's rehabilitation training, a process that would prove as complex and innovative as the prosthetic design itself. The team developed a careful protocol to gradually introduce him to the prosthetic components, starting with simple exposure to the materials and progressing through increasingly complex interactions. Using positive reinforcement techniques developed by elephant behaviorists and modified for this unique situation, they taught Kondo to accept the socket fitting process. Initially, this meant simply allowing the socket to touch his residual limb for a few seconds before receiving a reward of his favorite fruits. Gradually, the contact time increased until he would tolerate the socket being positioned for several minutes. The behavioral training revealed remarkable aspects of elephant intelligence and adaptability. Kondo quickly learned to associate the prosthetic components with positive experiences, actively participating in the fitting process by positioning his leg and remaining still during adjustments. His trunk became an important tool for exploring the prosthetic, allowing him to understand and accept this strange addition to his body. The first complete prosthetic was a marvel of engineering adapted specifically for African elephant physiology and the unique requirements of hind leg function. The socket was lined with medical-grade silicone that had been tested for long-term biocompatibility with elephant skin. The interior was custom-molded to match the exact contours of Kondo's residual limb, ensuring even pressure distribution and maximum comfort. The limb itself incorporated a sophisticated shock absorption system consisting of multiple components working together to handle the massive forces generated by elephant locomotion. A titanium framework provided structural strength while maintaining relatively low weight. Carbon fiber panels offered additional strength and flexibility. Most innovative was the hydraulic system that absorbed impact forces during each step and then released stored energy to assist with the next stride. The foot component required special attention since it would be in constant contact with varied terrain. The team designed a specialized tread pattern that would provide traction on the different surfaces Kondo might encounter within the sanctuary grass, mud, rocks, and the concrete areas around his shelter. The foot was also slightly larger than his natural feet to provide additional stability during the adjustment period. After 18 months of intensive design, testing, and behavioral preparation, the moment arrived for Kondo's first fitting with the complete prosthetic system. The process was approached with careful ceremony, recognizing the historic nature of this attempt. Never before had an African elephant been fitted with a hind leg prosthetic, and the success or failure of this moment would determine whether Kondo had a future or would face a lifetime of progressive disability. Kondo's first steps with the complete prosthetic were tentative and unsteady, but profoundly moving for everyone who witnessed them. The 24-month process from initial injury to first prosthetic steps represented unprecedented collaboration between veterinary medicine, biomedical engineering, animal behavior science, and international expertise sharing. As the young elephant carefully shifted his weight onto the artificial limb for the first time, every person present understood they were witnessing history in the making. The learning process was frustratingly slow and punctuated by numerous challenges. Kondo had to relearn fundamental movements, how to shift weight from his natural legs to the prosthetic, how to coordinate the artificial limb with his 3 natural ones, how to maintain balance during different activities. The prosthetic changed his center of gravity and required him to develop new muscle memory for movements that had once been instinctive. Initial sessions were limited to just a few minutes as Kondo gradually built confidence in the prosthetic. The team monitored every step for signs of discomfort, pressure points, or mechanical problems with the device. Adjustments were constant, modifying the fit, adjusting the hydraulic pressure, fine-tuning the foot angle to match Kondo's natural gait. Each modification required careful observation and analysis to ensure it improved rather than hindered his progress. But gradually, imperceptibly at first, genuine progress emerged. Kondo began to trust the prosthetic as part of his body rather than an external device. His natural elephant intelligence allowed him to adapt his movements to accommodate the different feel and response of the artificial limb. Most importantly, as his mobility improved and pain decreased, his personality began to resurface from the withdrawn, depressed state that had characterized his months of disability. The playful, curious young bull, who had been lost in months of pain and limitation, started to re-emerge. Kondo began to interact more readily with his caregivers, showing interest in his surroundings and engaging in the exploratory behaviors typical of young elephants. He would use his trunk to investigate new objects in his enclosure, test the boundaries of his expanding world, and even display moments of what could only be described as joy in his newfound mobility. The improvement in his psychological state seemed to accelerate his physical adaptation to the prosthetic. As Kondo's confidence grew, his willingness to challenge himself increased. He began attempting more complex movements, testing the limits of what his artificial limb could accomplish. The engineering team watched with fascination as their creation proved capable of handling demands they hadn't fully anticipated during the design phase. The physical therapy regimen developed for Kondo was unlike anything previously attempted in veterinary medicine. The team created exercises specifically designed to strengthen his core muscles and improve coordination between his natural and artificial limbs. They built obstacle courses to challenge his balance and build confidence in navigating different terrain with the prosthetic. These therapeutic activities had to be disguised as play and enrichment to maintain Kondo's engagement and enthusiasm. Rather than forced exercise routines, the team designed activities that engaged Kondo's natural curiosity and intelligence. Food puzzles encouraged him to move around his enclosure while using the prosthetic, requiring him to coordinate all four limbs to reach treats hidden in various locations. Enrichment activities challenged him to use both natural and artificial limbs in coordinated ways, building strength and confidence through positive experiences. 6 months after receiving his first prosthetic, Kondo achieved a milestone that brought tears to the eyes of his caregivers and marked a historic moment in veterinary medicine. He ran. Not the awkward, painful shuffle that had characterized his movement since the amputation, but a genuine, joyful run across the sanctuary grounds. The sight of this young elephant, who had been written off as terminally disabled, racing across the African landscape on his artificial leg, represented a triumph of human ingenuity and animal resilience. The run was captured on video and shared with the international team that had contributed to Kondo's recovery. Dr. Jivakate in Thailand watched the footage with tears in his eyes, knowing that his pioneering work with Asian elephants had been successfully adapted to help this African elephant half a world away. The Cambridge engineering team saw validation of months of design work and testing. Most importantly, Kondo's caregivers saw proof that their faith in his recovery had been justified. As Kondo continued to grow, the prosthetic required regular adjustments and eventually complete replacements to accommodate his increasing size and weight. Young elephants grow rapidly, and Kondo's prosthetic had to evolve with him. Each new version incorporated lessons learned from the previous iteration, improving comfort, durability, and function. The team developed a standardized fitting protocol that reduced the time needed for prosthetic changes and minimized stress for Kondo. The engineering improvements were significant with each generation of prosthetic. Better materials became available as technology advanced, manufacturing techniques improved, and the understanding of elephant biomechanics deepened. What had begun as a desperate experimental attempt to save one elephant's life evolved into a replicable system that could potentially help other amputee elephants around the world. Word of Kondo's success spread rapidly throughout the international conservation community. Wildlife organizations, veterinary colleges, and biomedical engineering programs began to take notice of this unprecedented achievement. Funding arrived from sources that had never previously supported elephant conservation. Drawn by the innovative technology and inspiring story of recovery, corporate sponsors saw opportunities to support cutting-edge research while associating their brands with positive conservation outcomes. The practical implications were enormous. Elephants are frequently injured by human activities, vehicle strikes, snares, landmines, and conflicts with farmers defending their crops. Many of these injuries result in amputations or disabilities that traditionally meant lifelong captivity or euthanasia. Kondo's prosthetic offered hope that these elephants might have alternatives, that disability need not mean the end of a meaningful life in the wild or semi-wild conditions. Research institutions around the world began to develop their own elephant prosthetic programs, building on the foundation established by Kondo's case. Universities in South Africa, India, and Sri Lanka, all countries with significant elephant populations, initiated studies on adapting prosthetic technology for local conditions and elephant subspecies. The knowledge gained from Kondo's case became the starting point for a new field of veterinary medicine. The workshop that had started in a converted storage building grew into a proper research facility, attracting veterinary students and biomedical engineers from universities across the globe. Graduate students wrote dissertations on elephant biomechanics, prosthetic material science, and the behavioral aspects of animal adaptation to assistive technology. The facility became a destination for researchers seeking to understand how engineering principles could be applied to solve biological problems. More importantly for Kondo personally, he became an ambassador for wildlife conservation and adaptive technology. School groups visiting the sanctuary would witness this remarkable elephant as living proof that disability need not mean hopelessness. His story inspired children to consider careers in veterinary medicine, biomedical engineering, and wildlife conservation. Teachers used his journey to illustrate concepts of resilience, innovation, and the power of international cooperation. The educational impact extended beyond inspiration to practical learning. Students could observe firsthand how engineering principles were applied to solve biological problems, how international collaboration could achieve results impossible for any single team, and how persistence and innovation could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Kondo became a living laboratory for understanding the intersection of technology and biology. The psychological transformation in Kondo was as remarkable as the physical achievement. His confidence returned not just in his movement, but in his social interactions with other elephants. Elephants are highly social animals, with complex relationships and communication systems. Kondo's disability and isolation had disrupted his social development at a critical age, but his restored mobility allowed him to begin rebuilding these crucial connections. With his mobility restored, Kondo began to re-establish relationships with other elephants in the sanctuary. The facility housed 12 other elephants, ranging from young calves to elderly matriarchs, each with their own rescue story. Kondo's integration into this social group required careful management, but his prosthetic allowed him to engage in the complex social behaviors that define elephant communities. He learned to play again, engaging in the gentle wrestling and chase games that young elephants use to develop social bonds and physical coordination. His prosthetic leg proved surprisingly durable during these activities, withstanding the rough play that might have been expected to damage such a sophisticated device. The engineering team took pride in seeing their creation perform successfully in real-world conditions they hadn't fully anticipated. Most significantly, Kondo began to demonstrate the intelligence and emotional depth that make elephants such extraordinary creatures. He showed empathy for other disabled animals at the sanctuary, seemed to understand his role as an inspiration to visitors, and even appeared to take pride in his prosthetic, sometimes displaying it prominently when photographers or film crews visited. His keepers noticed that he would position himself to show off his artificial limb during public demonstrations. The international attention brought unexpected benefits to the entire Sheldrick Wildlife Trust facility. Media coverage of Kondo's story generated donations that supported not just the prosthetic program, but the sanctuary's broader conservation mission. Companies manufacturing materials used in Kondo's prosthetic began donating products and technical expertise, creating a virtuous cycle of innovation and support. Corporate partnerships emerged that might never have existed without Kondo's story. Aerospace companies shared advanced materials technology. Medical device manufacturers provided expertise in biocompatible materials, and technology firms donated computing resources for biomechanical modeling. Kondo's case demonstrated how conservation could attract support from unexpected sources when it incorporated cutting-edge innovation. 4 years after that first helicopter sighting of a lone injured elephant by the Mara River, Kondo had become a thriving 7-year-old bull weighing over 3 tons. His prosthetic had been upgraded 3 times to accommodate his growth, each version representing significant refinements in design and material science. The artificial leg that had once seemed impossible was now an integrated part of his daily life, as natural to him as his original limbs had been.